what's up, hello. This is my first review of the new year. And as a New Year's resolution, what I've decided I'm gonna do is stop necessarily holding up the book the whole time, simply because I can just put in a photo and it would be exactly the same. So I listened to a podcast from the New York Public Library called The Librarian is In. I highly recommend it if you like to hear two fun people talk about books. And they discussed a book called Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. And this book is not recent. There are a lot of opinions out there about it. There are a lot of reviews out there about it. And there is a movie with 3 very famous people in it that is of the same name and is based on this book. So I am certainly not the first to discuss it, and I'm sure nor will I be the last, but this was a book that in December of last year, I gave a 5-star review to, and so definitely felt it was worth talking about with you folks. I will say that I cannot guarantee that this will be 100% spoiler-free. I'll do my best, but it's hard to talk about pieces of this plot without giving a little bit away, sort of without giving that reveal up. So if you want to read this book and haven't yet, or you want to see the movie and haven't yet, and want to go into it knowing absolutely nothing, we'll see you later. So this is one of those books where you sort of fall on either side of the line, it seems. There are a lot of folks who really love it and a lot of folks that really hate it. No one really seems to be super lukewarm about it. To that point, if you watch Beck's review from a couple years ago, it's less of a review and more of a rant because she did not enjoy it whatsoever. And you'll soon discover that she and I are on totally opposite sides of the line. She couldn't stand it and I loved it. So the book is from the perspective of this woman called Kathy, and in a very memoir type way, she's telling the story of her life, mainly about her time at a boarding school called Hailsham with her friends Tommy and Ruth, and stretching into the rest of her life into her 30s, which is the time and age that she's telling the story from. The book is set in England in the 1990s, which is interesting to me because you don't see a lot of stories that feel dystopic that are set sort of in the past. Most of them are set sort of in the near future or the distant future, and this one was behind us as opposed to in front of us. It's a new way of re-envisioning what happened after the war, which I found very intriguing. So as Kathy is very much looking back on her life, she describes her school, her friends, her teachers at this place. She describes how her teachers look out for her. Most of what takes place in her retelling is evasive in terms of particulars of what they learn about at this school and what their futures will hold, which sort of brings me to the first piece I want to talk about, which is the writing style and the tone. I wouldn't go so far as to call the prose in this book sparse, but it is uncluttered. There's nothing in there that doesn't need to be there, and that really speaks to the fact that this book is from Kathy's perspective. The narration is a retelling, but it's in no way a reflection. It's not a reflective type of prose. She's often trying to make one point or tell you this one thing and realizes halfway through that she can't do it without referencing another event or another memory, and that she needs to tell you about that in order to give you the full picture of the next thing that she wants to talk about, which is something that feels very stream of consciousness, but in a more structured way than, say, Joyce. And the narration never changes. You never get anybody else's side of the story. You only work from Kathy's exclusive perception and interpretation, which privileges memory and effect of that memory over facts most of the time. And similarly to the fact that this is not a reflection, it's just a retelling, in a way, a recounting. It's not nostalgic, although it sort of seems that way at first and can seem more like that toward the end when she gets older and she's telling the story about times where she's closer in age than she is at the moment that she's giving the narration. But it stops short of being those things. The tone isn't devoid of feeling. It's clear that Kathy feels things, but it does seem like she's also lacking emotion. It's a very complicated tone. It's almost resigned. I would say it's close to resignation, especially near the end of the book where, you know, she faces great disappointment and sadness about the outcomes of her friends' lives, about the outcome of what her own life is going to be. She comes across not as disappointed, but I think more like just tonelessly accepting, as if she's never had a reason to really hope at all for anything in the first place. And the tone, the way that book is written definitely sets up the way that you perceive the characters. I wouldn't say that there's a great effort made in this story to get you to feel strongly about anybody. Hopefully, because she is telling the story and because that she is the protagonist, you do start to feel a little bit of connection to Kathy, but you don't really feel strongly, or at least I didn't, about anyone in particular. That is to say, to get to the point where I liked them. And sort of not in the traditional sense that one might like or dislike a character. A lot of the interactions between the students, Kathy, Tommy, and Ruth, in their time at school, mostly between Tommy and other students and between Ruth and Kathy, are mean. They're outrightly cruel. They're negative interactions. These three characters all have very distinct personalities, and all of which are very understandable. And when they come together, they clash. And the tone of that clashing and the way that Kathy is talking about those interactions is so blank and toneless, but you can tell underneath that these are not positive experiences for her. So these characters, like I said, are all very distinct. Tommy is sort of like this lonesome, disconnected, quick-tempered boy, and Kathy is impressively regular and quiet, and then Ruth is like chatty and ambitious, and if she were in a different English boarding school, she would 100% be a Slytherin. She's always out for her own gain, but she's also sort of the most, as though she's the meanest, she's also the most realistic and easy to understand of all the characters, I think. There's something about her ways of getting to other people and making choices and keeping secrets and interacting with others that feels natural, like we've seen it before. It's very much, like angry girl tropey type behavior that we see in YA especially. But the interactions between all of these characters seem to illustrate all of their worst qualities. We get these characterizations all from Kathy's point of view, and she recalls their interactions, but she's also reliant on her own memory in these instances, which shows, I think, the negative side more than the positive side, because she's remembering them in the way that they have impacted and reflected upon her. So it's just another level of sorting out what happened and whose perception we're really working with. Which sort of brings me to the next piece I want to talk about, which is the seeming lack of plot that this book has. It does feel a little bit like a memoir, but it is indeed a novel. And I've read other novels where, you get to the end and it feels like although these dozens and dozens of events have occurred, nothing has actually happened. That I've had that feeling a lot about a number of books that I've read. But this doesn't feel that way. Something has definitely happened. The arc of the narrative feels very long. This is very much a recollection, and because of such, there isn't a mapped out plot that drives the story. It begins with these students' time at the school at Hailsham and moves into what happens after their time there. It comes to an end, and then the very tail end of the novel, maybe the last 100 pages or so, only then does any sort of driving force or plot or action or pursuit come into play. When Ruth discloses to Tommy and Kathy the one thing that does spark all of this, it compels them into action, and interestingly, that action spawns a lot of exposition, which, like any good sort of like mystery novel reveal, is at the very end of the story, which is a unique place to put it. And it's that revelation that brings up all of the main themes, which are there and present throughout the rest of the book. You're thinking about them because you as the reader have a little bit of an idea what's going on, but only enough to sort of start to make your own like gut reaction type feelings to what's going on. And as you get this additional backstory, when all the cards, so to speak, are on the table, it really brings like the crux of the moral and ethical themes to the forefront. All along at Hailsham, their entire lives, and in the time after, wherever they're placed, they've been brought up for a specific purpose. These people have been brought into the world for a reason, with limited access to the outside world and with selective pieces of information given to them about what their future is going to look like, what path other people have decided will be laid out for them, and a route that they will follow, because that is who they are and that's what they have been put on earth to do. I mean, thematically, the book draws choice. Like, how do we make our own choices? Do we make our own choices? Should we be allowed to make our own choices? It brings that to the forefront. Acceptance. Who do we accept? Humanity. Like, who do we accept as fully human? And moreover, what does it mean to be so? all of these things are discussed, and these are huge topics to grapple with in a book that is as short as this one. It's not excessively long, and I can understand how there are those who dislike this story because it tries to deal with those themes and ideas in this writing style that it does, and that maybe this is a story that is better served as being just a story, and that there should be sort of better character and plot payoff for the type of prose that you're getting, as opposed to like a philosophical spiraling and pontification. But I completely disagree. I think that the book does bring up those questions. You can't have a plot like this and not prompt those ideas, but it doesn't ever give you that payoff. It doesn't close the book on definite answers, but it does serve to prompt us to think more deeply about those questions, and I think that that's an interesting piece about art and literature as a whole. It entertains us, it drives us, and if they happen, the artists in their work, to give us something more to think about, fantastic. This book does that so well. The one thing about Never Let Me Go that was missing for me was some backstory on the school, Hailsham, and the program that is created to bring it to life. We get a little bit of that right at the end with that sort of end of story exposition, but I wanted to know more about how all of this came about, the decisions that were made to make this choice, but it became very clear just from the character Miss Emily when she's giving this explanation that you're never going to get that. So I knew it wasn't coming, but that was my one disappointment. So I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I think it was my only 5-star review of the year. I'm not really sure what pushed me over the edge into that 5th star, but that is what I decided. If you have specific thoughts about this book, because it seems like everybody does, please put them in the comments below. I'd love to see what everyone thinks. And additionally, if you feel lukewarm about this book, if you're like sort of in the middle, like, yeah, it was fine, it was okay, tell me that too. I would love to hear from like one of those people, please. So that being said, I hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives. Everything that you want to know about us is indeed in the description. Thanks so much for watching as always, and we'll see you soon.